Isn't it funny how things can change? One minute it looked like the Motor City Machine Guns were winding down their careers in TNA, and next thing you know they're just signed with the WWE and they've captured the tag belts. I never expected this, especially with their history of injuries and being in their 40s. But age doesn't really seem to be a factor in wrestling anymore, and the Guns were not party guys. They probably looked after themselves. And man, did these guys earn what they're getting now? Chris Sabin being the WWE Tag Team Champion is surprisingly not the highest up on the card he's ever been. Because for a cup of coffee in 2013 TNA, they decided to push Chris Sabin into the main event. And it didn't go great. This is the story of Chris Sabin, the TNA Heavyweight Champion. As usual, the Guns have been split up as Sabin was out for a year of an ACL tear, and when he returned, Shelley got injured. This happened a lot to them. One returned from injury and instantly the other one would get injured. It was unfortunate. Chris Sabin had history in the X division, being a 4-time champion at the time, so it only made sense for him to return to the division that he helped build. There was no real hint at the time that this was anything other than Chris Sabin being the cruiserweight trying to help out a struggling X division. The X division portion of this story is slightly confusing, so bear with me. Sabin entered an X division title tournament and the champion was Kenny King, who kept calling him Frail Sabin. It was clear on his return that Sabin was now wrestling a less high risk style. He earned his way into an X Division title match at Slammiversary 2013, and it was going to be an Ultimate X match. Also in this triple threat would be a man who loved taking his own life, and the champion Kenny King. This would be a real test for Sabin with his 2 ACL injuries. I guess TNA were dicks by putting him in this match. Well, fortunately Sabin survived the Ultimate X match and actually won the thing too, making Sabin a 5-time champion. At the next pay-per-view, Option C would come into play, and that's something the Hawk should probably explain, because this is a really hard to follow few weeks of telly. Option C had been invented a year earlier by Austin Aries. The gimmick was that whoever was the X Division champion at the Destination X pay-per-view would be able to trade in their title for a World Heavyweight title shot. So Sabin picked up his new belt at a perfect time, but it would not be plain sailing. A few weeks before Sabin would have the decision about Option C to make, he had to defend his title in a triple threat. Before that match could take place, the Aces and Eights jumped Sabin and dragged him into a shipping container. This was just Bully Ray throwing his weight about and trying to scare Sabin into not challenging for Bully Ray's world title. Seems like the seeds are being sown here. The triple threat match that night was the masked man who loves taking his own life, Kenny King and Chris Sabin once again. It looked like Sabin had King beaten with the Hell Sabin, but the Life Taker stopped that. He reverses Kenny King's finisher into a pin, and now Sidey is the X Division champion. It was a weird twist, considering Bully Ray had just threatened Sabin before the match. Then the Hulkster Hogan storms out of a strange little injured man. Hulk tells us that this is TJ Perkins, and he is usually the man under the mask of Sidey. So someone took him out and stole his outfit. The masked man refuses to reveal himself and runs away with the belt, but Hogan is a determined little Hulkster and he returned later in the night. He ruled that unless the masked man revealed himself, he wouldn't let him do Option C. This gets the masked moron's attention and Bully Ray's attention too. Bully says that he scared Sabin so much earlier in the night that he lost deliberately so he didn't have to face Bully Ray. Hogan demands the mask comes off. The guy cuts a promo of a creepy voice changer. It sounds like he's definitely going to challenge for Ray's title. The mask comes off and it's Austin Aries, the man who invented Option C, a man who has already been the heavyweight champion. So that's Sabin screwed then because Aries just had this big angle and he's already established as a main eventer. Fast forward to the next episode of Impact, and Hogan almost seems proud of Aries' actions. He admits Aries can have a title shot, but only if he can win his next triple threat X Division match. Then Hogan randomly changes the Life Taker's name to Manic. Oh, thank God, no more skirting around that name. And Sabin Mania, as Hogan calls him. Hogan wants this settled tonight, and they have a great main event, and it's a time where the X Division finally feels important being in the main event. The ring is surrounded by 2 factions, the Aces and Eights and the main event Mafia, who are warring, and there's big moves going off everywhere. Aces and Eights want nobody to win this one. What a match this is. It's really just about Sabin and Austin Aries. Manic is pretty much nowhere to be seen. These guys are kicking out finishers and the crowd sound like a TNA crowd from 5 years prior. Sabin wins it with the top rope Hell Sabin, and once again Chris Sabin is back in the world title picture. He says you're looking at the next world champion. The Austin Aries swerve was an interesting one, and I do think that it served a purpose to elevate this division, if only temporarily. With just 2 weeks to go, Bully Ray opens the next show with a scathing rant about how much Chris Sabin sucks. The time finally comes for Sabin to make his decision on trading the title in. I can't help but wonder on Hogan's true thoughts as he describes Chris Sabin as the greatest wrestler to ever live. Sabin is about to hand the belt over when the Aces and Eights music hits. Bully Ray wants to have his say. He calls Sabin a little boy who could never defeat a man like him. Sabin shows some fire here and reminds Bully that it was him who kicked out of the 3D and also pinned Bully Ray to retire the Team 3D tag team. He swears he'll beat him despite the size advantage. Put yourself in Chris Sabin's shoes, he must have been a bag of nerves standing on the stage with the Hulkster, but you can't tell. He hands in the belt and it's now official, Option C has been activated. The Icon Sting swears that the main event Mafia will keep the Aces and Eights away from this match to make sure it's fair. In the lead up to this, Bully seems to be more distracted by the Hogan family drama than the upcoming challenger Sabin. Finally, we reached the night of the actual heavyweight title match. It's been a slightly confused twist in path, but we've made it. It's not actually on a pay-per-view, it's just an Impact special. The Aces and Eights trap the main event Mafia, so it's not looking good for Sabin. It's Chris Sabin challenging for the TNA Heavyweight title. This is an interesting old school matchup. Bully Ray is on offense for like 99% of it. If you were a picky man, you might want to get Sabin a little bit more in here. But despite that, I still like this match. Despite everything happening earlier in the night, the main event Mafia and the Aces and Eights are here once again. Bully spends most of the match working on the previously injured legs of Sabin. Nothing Bully Ray does works though, and Sabin kicks his head off. A Sabin dive causes a ref bump. Anderson hands Bully Ray a hammer and chaos ensues. Everybody brawls to the back and only Sabin and Ray are left. Bully has the hammer, but he can't use it. Bully stops Sabin from using it too, and he attempts a powerbomb, when Sabin picks up the hammer and says, "Shut up or I'll smack you one," and drills him in the head with the hammer, and Sabin does it. He wins. You can just tell TNA barely cared about Sabin getting his world title, as there's about 30 seconds of celebrations. You'd think TNA management would be creaming in their knickers because they hate the Aces and Eights, the group which was trying to take over their company. Yeah, it felt like they did Sabin a bit dirty here. Sabin celebrates with the main event Mafia on the next Impact, but Bully Ray interrupts and brings a lawyer with him. He asks if the fans know who the lawyer is, and the crowd chant, "Kevin Nash." He really does look like Nash. He demands Sabin returns the title or Bully Ray will sue TNA. Very badass from the leader of a badass biker gang. Sabin responds later in the night, calling Bully a crybaby. Sabin says that he already essentially had his career ended with his leg injuries, but he won't use it as an excuse, despite it being mentioned every week that Sabin almost lost his career. Hogan refuses to care about Bully Ray suing TNA. He does admit that Bully Ray has a rematch clause, but because of the faction warfare, the rematch will take place in a cage. Sabin has just the 2 matches before facing world champion Bully Ray. Neither of them are title defences. The first is an X Division match against Manic. It honestly feels like this one is a bit below Sabin at this point. He's been having these sort of matches his entire career. Let's have him beat someone with more size or credentials. Sabin defeats him with the Hell Sabin in a match which he really struggled to cope in. Known dick Bully Ray attacks Sabin after the match, but Sabin does fight him off to his credit, but I think they were missing out on having some sort of big meaningful spot here. More work was required to make Sabin a believable heavyweight champion. They didn't even have him wrestle in the main event here. Sabin and Bully Ray have another face-off where Sabin sounds like a bit of a geek with his insults. Brooke Hogan adds a stipulation for the title match that if Bully Ray loses, he'll never get a title match again. Sabin just sort of fades into the background as Hogan and Bully Ray discuss bedroom antics. Anyway, the only other match before the title match is Chris Sabin teaming up with Perk Angle to take on the Dudley Boyz. Hey, I thought Sabin retired these guys as a team. Predictably, Sabin is isolated for the whole match, and it feels like Kurt is the only main eventer in the ring. TNA eventually do the right thing here though, with Chris Sabin picking up the win for his team after dodging Bully Ray and sending him for a table and then diving off the top at him. But he still doesn't feel like a damn main event guy. Hardcore Justice is another Impact special rather than a pay-per-view, and this would be the site of Bully Ray's rematch. At least the cage helps it to feel like a bigger deal. Sabin does get more of the match this time. This is a good match. Bully Ray does almost break his arm here though. We get a ref bump and Mr. Anderson slams the door into Sabin. Anderson comically screams, "You shall not pass," before the Mafia get rid of him. Then Tito Ortiz, who remembers this guy? The man responsible for the greatest TNA debut of all time. He has a hammer and smashes away the main event Mafia, but he doesn't even use it on Sabin. Bully throws Sabin into the cage and hits a powerbomb, and that's the win, just like that. Not sure if they made a mistake here, because Bully almost won clean other than Anderson holding the door closed. After losing the world title, there was no rematch for Chris Sabin, further showing that TNA only ever saw him as a transitional champion. It was almost straight back to the X Division for Sabin as soon as this ended. They didn't even try to keep him about in the main event. Chris Sabin would leave TNA about 6 months after this took place. Oh, and Bully Ray stole his girl from Velvet Sky, for real. Ultimately, this whole thing was very strange. They had the Aces and Eights faction running rampant in TNA for ages, and the payoff was that Chris Sabin is the one to beat the leader Bully Ray? No, it wasn't really about that. All this was really about was TNA just trying to give credibility to the Option C thing, which had only started a year earlier. They wanted to keep it going. Option C helped present the image that anything could happen in TNA. It was never really about Chris Sabin, he was just the best option to run with from the X Division. TNA usually had ratings of around 1 to 1.2, but they had been slipping below that. They were desperate for a boost, and credit to Chris Sabin, for the few weeks he was the champion, the viewing figures bumped back up to what TNA was used to. And when Bully Ray regained the title, they slipped back down again. So there were clearly some fans interested in the Chris Sabin experiment, but TNA sure weren't interested. They never presented Sabin like he really mattered. This title reign was very easy to miss as it was very short, forgettable, and he didn't even successfully defend the belt. At the time, Sabin as a champion drew mockery from WWE fans. They said it made TNA look second rate, and if you don't agree with that, don't show love, show hate.